Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the details of the nuclear deal agreement between Iran and the P5+1 powers. And it is as follows. On July the 14th, Iran and the United States and its negotiating partners reached an agreement to curb Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. The economic benefits for Iran are potentially massive. Iran stands to receive more than $100 billion in assets frozen overseas and an end to a European oil embargo and various financial restrictions on Iranian banks. Not only will Iran get access to its frozen assets, it can now start selling its oil on the world market. As part of the sanctions relief, Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani, who killed U.S. soldiers and who conducts foreign operations outside Iran's borders and directs Iran's terrorist activities throughout the world, will be a part of a list of companies and individuals who will have sanctions against them removed. Diplomats struck the deal after the latest 18-day round of intensive negotiations were held in Vienna, Austria. The agreement is intended to keep Iran from producing enough material for a nuclear weapon for at least 10 years. Diplomats said that Iran agreed to the continuation of a United Nations arms embargo on the country for up to 5 more years, though it could end it earlier if the International Atomic Energy Agency definitely clears Iran of any current work on nuclear weapons. A similar condition was put on UN restrictions on the transfer of ballistic missile technology to Iran, which could last for up to 8 more years. According to officials, Iran also agreed to a so-called snapback provision under which sanctions could be reinstated if it violates the agreement. The deal includes a compromise between the United States and Iran that would allow UN inspectors to press for visits to Iranian military sites as part of their monitoring duties. However, access at will to any site will not necessarily be granted, and even if so, could be delayed, a condition that critics of the deal are sure to seize on as possibly giving Iran time to cover any sign of non-compliance with its commitments. The agreement requires international inspectors to ask Iran's permission first, after which Iran has 14 days to decide whether to grant it. If not, the same group of nations that struck the deal would have another 10 days to make their decision about what to do next. While the international group may have final say, the setup essentially gives Iran 24 days to drag out the process. Under the deal, Iran would have the right to challenge the UN request, and an arbitration board composed of Iran and the 6 world powers that negotiated with it would have to decide on the issue. Such an arrangement would still be a notable departure from assertion by top Iranian officials, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, that their country would never allow the International Atomic Energy Agency into such sites. Iran has argued that such visits by the IAEA would be a cover for spying on its military secrets. As part of the agreement, Iran will cut by about 2/3 the number of centrifuges which can make fuel for nuclear power stations, but also the core of a nuclear bomb, from around 19,000 to just over 6,000. The U.S. Congress has 60 days to review the agreement and can vote to approve it or reject it. However, should Congress pass a resolution of disapproval, U.S. President Barack Obama would veto that resolution. In an interview with Israeli television, Obama said that there was no military option to stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. Obama said, "A military solution will not solve the problem. Even if the United States participates in it, it would only temporarily slow down an Iranian nuclear program, but it would not eliminate it." Obama said that a verifiable agreement with Iran was the best way forward. He said, "I can demonstrate, not based on any hope, but on facts and evidence and analysis, that the best way to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon is a verifiable, tough agreement. Speaking from the White House, Obama claimed that the nuclear deal meets every single one of the bottom lines from a tentative agreement struck earlier this year. He said, "Does this deal resolve all the threats Iran poses to its neighbors in the world? No. Does it do more than anyone has done before to make sure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon? Yes. Every pathway to a nuclear weapon is cut off," Obama said, claiming that it provides for extensive inspections. "This deal is not built on trust. It is built on verification." Obama added, "If Iran violates this deal, the sanctions we imposed that have helped cripple the Iranian economy, the sanctions that helped make this deal possible, would snap back into place promptly. Still, you're going to hear a lot of overheated and often dishonest arguments about it in the weeks ahead," he said. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Obama's comments, warning that the emerging deal would pave the way for Iran to attain a nuclear arsenal. He said the deal would also see Iran's economy boosted and thus enable it to engage in further terrorist activity. However, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry insisted that Israel would be safer under the terms of the nuclear deal. Kerry said, "We believe that Israel will be safer with a one-year breakout to a nuclear weapon for the 10 years of heightened restrictions stipulated by the deal than the 2 months now that it is estimated that it would take Iran to break out to acquire a nuclear weapon." That is, according to many Western intelligence estimates. Meanwhile, Israel Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon, opposition leader Isaac Herzog, and Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid, and other political leaders in Israel have slammed the nuclear agreement with Iran, which leaves much of Iran's enrichment infrastructure and offensive missile programs intact and depends on trusting the Iranian regime to adhere to the agreement despite a long record of breaking previous promises. Israel argues that the U.S. could have negotiated a better deal. In response, Kerry rejected the Israeli criticism that a better deal was possible. "Now, there's no alternative being provided by all those other people," he charged. "They all say, 'Oh, why don't you crush them by sanctions?' I'll tell you why. Because they won't be crushed by sanctions. That's been proven. And because we'll lose the other people who are helping to provide those sanctions," he said, referring to UN Security Council members from Europe, Russia, and China, among others, who are eager to see the end of Iranian sanctions. Kerry warned that the alternative to the current deal was war. Following the Iranian nuclear deal, the United States is drafting a United Nations Security Council resolution which supports the agreed-upon Iranian nuclear deal. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, will outline the main points in the agreement to Council members. The resolution will replace the existing framework of Security Council sanctions with the restrictions agreed during the negotiations in Vienna, Power said. The resolution already has the backing of UN veto-wielding members who took part in the Iranian talks, namely Britain, the United States, France, China, and Russia, as well as Germany. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responded for the first time on the country's nuclear deal and applauded his country's negotiating team for their efforts toward achieving the deal. Furthermore, Khamenei said that in spite of the nuclear agreement, Iran's policies toward the United States and the world will not change. He said, "We have repeatedly said that we don't negotiate with the United States on regional or international affairs, not even on bilateral issues. There are some exceptions, like the nuclear program that we negotiate with the Americans, which serve our interests. We will never stop supporting our friends in the region and the people of Palestine, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, and Lebanon," he continued, referring to the Iranian terror axis in the Middle East. "Even after this deal, our policy toward the arrogant United States will not change." After Khomeini spoke his words, the crowd responded by saying, "Death to Israel and death to America." In response, Khomeini said that he hoped that God would answer their prayers. Israel's Security Cabinet unanimously rejected the Iranian deal and said that Israel reserves the right to take action to protect the state. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the nuclear agreement with Iran will not prevent it from getting a nuclear bomb, while granting it sanctions relief to continue its aggressive policies in the region. He called the agreement a bad mistake of historic proportions, and that it was filled with absurdities. For some reason, Netanyahu said, there is a willingness in the West to accept despotic regimes and seek peace with them at any price. Netanyahu added that because of this deal, Iran is going to receive a sure path to nuclear weapons because many of the restrictions that were supposed to prevent it from getting there will be lifted. With the removal of economic sanctions, Netanyahu warned, Iran will get a jackpot, a cash bonanza of hundreds of billions of dollars, which will enable it to continue to pursue its aggression and terror in the region. As a result, Netanyahu said that Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran because Iran continues to seek our destruction. Israel will always defend itself, Netanyahu said, and if it weren't for Israel, Iran would have had a nuclear weapon long ago. In further slamming the nuclear deal with Iran, Netanyahu said that as a result, Israel must now first and foremost rely on itself to defend itself rather than trusting in the support of the United States and the nations of the world. Israel's education minister, Naftali Bennett, said, a terrorist nuclear superpower has now been born, and it will go down as one of the darkest days in world history. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Zipi Hatovli accused Western powers of surrendering to Iran regarding the nuclear deal, saying, this deal is a historic surrender by the West to the axis of evil headed by Iran. As a result, Israel will act with all means to try and stop the agreement from being ratified. Israel Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein said, I regret to say that the agreement signed with Iran expresses a systematic collapse, a hallucination with international sponsorship. Iran is toying with the West and stated openly its intention to continue its murderous plans even against the ones negotiating with it, and that is why this is a dangerous illusion, not just for Israel but for the world's peace. This agreement is paving the way for Iran to build numerous nuclear bombs while giving tens of billions of dollars to the Iranian terror machine. This agreement is a true collapse of our iron wall in the face of fundamentalist evil. This agreement is the beginning of the collapse of the Western wall of resistance to the murderous conquest of the Iranian school of extreme Islam. In challenging Israel's disapproval of the nuclear deal with Iran, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said, those who would prefer that we simply take military action now against Iran without going the last diplomatic mile, you need to consider that such a response would first destroy the international sanctions coalition, he said. He added that it would only set Iran's nuclear program back by a few years at best, at which point Iran likely would bury a new program deep underground and speed toward an actual nuclear weapon. All that said, the United States continues to believe, as we have from day one, that no deal is preferable to a bad deal. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you the details of a nuclear deal agreement between Iran and the United States and its negotiating partners. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.